Hey, happy Monday. Monday's especially good this week for me because we're on fall break all week this week. Um, since last week, we talked a little bit about the grit factor and all that's associated with that and how important that is to be successful. This week, we're going to kind of take that and show the tools that we can use to enhance that grit factor, even in junior high students who most of the time don't necessarily want to expose that trait. Um, these online tools, some of them are going to be um, more difficult than others. Some of them are going to be quick one hitters right at the beginning of class that you can do. Others are going to be some that take all class long to do. Um, I've found they're the best tools that I've come across, since everything is technology driven these days, and students love being on their Chromebooks and whatever devices you guys use. Anyway, so these would be good for them to use and implement in the classroom. The first website is one that really deals with grit, and since last week um, was the last week before fall break, and we just started a new 9 weeks, just ended in a big chapter unit. So instead of starting something new right before fall break, I decided to kind of hone in on everything we learned so far and use the grit factor to show a few more difficult problems. So this website's called Open Middle. It really, really, really hones in on their number sense and makes sure that they understand the why behind everything and why things work. So for example, here is a problem that I would give them. And again, up top, you can pretty much use this for any grade you want. They have all kinds of different categories and everything, ratios, number system, everything for each grade that you teach and all the standards. So one thing we did in this lesson or in this chapter was turning fractions into decimals and how that works. So in this case, the problem is using digits 1 to 9 at most one time each. Place a digit in each box to make it a true statement. This is sort of more of a lower level difficulty, but it kind of trained them on how these problems work from the get-go. So they have to find numbers to fit in the boxes to make this true, and one of the benefits of these problems is that it works a bunch of different problems in the same problem. So they've got to sit there and change a bunch of different fractions to decimals and see which ones work to make it just one decimal place and why that works. And they can only use digits 1 to 9 in each box, and they can't use it again if they've used it once. So it made it really difficult for them, and it trains them to kind of use that delayed gratification that we don't get in today's society as much. I told them straight up, one of the days this week was kind of a lesson on just what instant gratification is and how it's different from delayed gratification. And I told them their brains are hardwired to accept instant gratification more than anything, and if they don't have that instant gratification, then they kind of just give up or don't want to try anymore. And it's not their fault that their brains are trained that way with technology and everything these days, but it does become their fault if they don't train their brains to think otherwise and really try on those problems that they might not get right away. So this is an example of a problem they might not get right away, but do they give up or do they keep working at it? And I told them the difference. I showed them a video. The guy used a boomerang as an example. And in today's day and age, they would throw a boomerang 1 or 2 times, see it hit the ground right away, and then they just say this is stupid and go back inside and get back on their phones or watch TV or something like that. And again, I told them it's not their fault. They get on social media. I told them I'm not some old geezer that's way past technology and thinks it's ruining the world, but they get on social media, they post a picture, they expect a like right away. That's instant gratification. They share a post, they expect a like right away. That's instant gratification. I told them I post these YouTube videos, I expect views right away. That's instant gratification. Nobody's above it, nobody's immune to instant gratification, but you can train your brain to think otherwise and really work on that delayed gratification and realize the benefits from that. I told him that all successful people, like the Angela Duckworth talks about with grit, they all have that same trait, grit, and they don't get it right away. Well, do they give up or do they keep going? My quote of the day this week, I used a quote from Albert Einstein. Said, It's not really that I'm so smart. It's just that I don't quit on a problem until I find a solution." And I think it's important to hear it from people that everybody that just assumes is really smart as well. Another example, so that the difficulties kind of range on these. So they've got this same problem, but they make it a little more difficult down here, and you kind of just have to search through them for the ones you want to use. But this one has a 2-digit number over another 2-digit number, and it equals a number with 2 decimal spots. And they have to fill in every single box with a digit 0 to 9, and they can only use each digit one time. So again, it works a bunch of problems at one time. You know, they're sitting there trying different things, figuring out the whys behind it, and figuring out how these numbers work and how they can manipulate them to get the result that they want. So one day in class, I gave them 4 problems, and I told them, you can check with me 2 times. I'll make a tally each time you check with me, and I'll give you 2 tries to check with me and see if they're right. But you have 4 problems. So on at least 2 of the problems, you're going to have to sit there and check on your own. Does my answer make sense? Does it follow the rules and regulations of the problem? Did I cover everything? And does it equal the right thing? It's really great. And there was pushback at first with just like with anything you do with junior high students. But I told them I know they're tough. That's the point of this. I understand. You sitting there telling me and whining that it's tough. It's not benefiting anybody. There's nobody in the room benefiting from anybody complaining. And I get it. I know that they're tough. That's why I'm doing it. So here's a really good example of one that takes a lot of number sense, and it builds in factors of multiplying and dividing, or multiplying positive and negative numbers, and at the same time multiplying fractions. So it says find 3 fractions whose product is -5 over 24. You may use fractions between -8/9 to 8/9, no more than 1 time each. I only made them find 1 solution. You can do 2 like it says to. But with this one, I drew it on the board for them just to help them out a little bit. And if your whole class is struggling and they can't find a solution and you feel bad for them, which I don't do this, but if you do feel bad for them, there are hints, but they're not really that good of hints anyway, so it doesn't make a huge difference. But these problems really work with the number sense, and they train these kids to keep working until you find a solution, you know. And I told them they're for a grade, and we've got process standards in math, and one of them's persevering through problems. And I told them that's exactly what this is training them for, that process standard, to persevere and don't give up so easily. The effort really started to increase as I pretty much didn't baby them and didn't spoon feed them through it, and they got used to it. And I think throughout the year, as we continue doing these, there will be less and less complaining and more hard work through them. I could already see it from the get-go after just a few days of doing these. Another tool that's really cool is the Graphing Stories. It's graphingstories.com. And it plays a video, and you just give them a blank graph, and they have to represent the situation with a graph that the video is playing. So here's an example of a video here, and they have to measure the height of the weight off the ground on a graph. So it shows you how to represent the graph. On the y-axis, you put height of the waist off the ground in feet, and then on the x-axis, you do time in seconds. And then they have to represent this situation, and it'll show a regular speed. It'll slow it down for them and show a slow-mo speed. And it's got a time ticker down at the bottom to help them out to measure the time. And then they have to just graph how high is this guy's waist off the ground. And it really builds in that graphing and the number sense again. And I think it's a great tool if you're working with graphing or just representing a situation using a graph and how it really works. Another one is 3-act math. I'm sure you guys have all seen some sort of this technique in some way, shape, or form, but this one's called whenmathhappens.com, and they show all kinds of 3-act maths. So the first one that I picked was the bridges, and I'm going to use it sometime throughout the year. So it shows these cars driving across bridges. And if you can't hear the volume, it's just telling them the rates that these cars are going across the bridges, and that's all the information it gives them. So then it asks them to answer which car will cross the bridge first, and to write down a guess just based on the information you're given. And it gives them different rates, like one's in kilometers per hour, one's in miles per hour. One tells them it's sitting in traffic for 20 minutes and then goes a certain miles per hour. And then it asks what information would be useful to figure this out. Write down some questions in your head right now. So it kind of gets them thinking, what's going to help us solve this problem? What do we need? What information do we need, without actually giving it right away? And then hopefully they ask, well, how far are these bridges? How long are they? And then it tells them the distances of each bridge. And it gives it to them in different measurements, like miles, feet, and kilometers. So there's a lot of conversions that take place. That adds another element to the math problem. And then you also just have to work with rates and how it differs. And you got to get them all on the same rate of change and all that. So it's a lot of math involved in one problem. And these problems usually take a big chunk of the class. It's not something that's going to be done right away. I know I'm speeding through it. And then after they finally solve it on their own, hopefully, then it shows them the real result, and it passes these cars along the bridge and shows which one will get there first. And hopefully they came up with the right answer with the same rate or the same time in this case. A quick one-hitter is estimation 180. I haven't actually used this in class, but I learned about it. All these I've learned from other people. I didn't really find any of them on my own. But this one was it's just another way to get number sense involved. So, for example, this summer we were working with elementary and junior high kids in a football camp. And I asked them, out of their stance, how long is their first step out of a stance supposed to be? And the correct answer is 6 inches, about 6 inches. And one kid said 8 meters. That is a lack of number sense. That is a lack of measurement judgment. And so these problems kind of build that in. The first day, they just ask, what's his height? What do you approximate his height to be? And then what do you estimate his wife's height to be? And what do you estimate his son's height to be? And they build off of each other day to day. And it just helps with that number sense, that estimation, and realizing how measurements and links really work. Another one I'm sure you guys have all heard of is Desmos. I haven't used it yet this year because we haven't graphed lines yet, but there's a few different. You can just type in whatever standard you're trying to teach or whatever activity you want to do. This one's a marble slide. You have to write an equation for a line to collect these yellow marbles. So they'll drop the purple marble down, and you have to make a line that'll help that purple marble collect all the yellow ones. You have to you have to create your own equation of the line. So it helps with manipulating equations of lines, what makes the line different, x and y intercepts, all that stuff. It actually gives them a function at first, and then they have to, on some of them, and they have to change it from there to manipulate it. So whenever they start playing around with it, toying around with it, they can really realize what changes a line and how it affects the line whenever you change different numbers. These are good to do if you are out of class for the day for something and you need something for them to work on their own, because they usually take about the whole class period to do. As you can see, there's a lot of problems, a lot of different line situations. Another example is polygraph. It's kind of like Guess Who, the game growing up, Guess Who, where you ask different traits of the person and narrow it down from there who you think the person is. So in this case, this is asking different traits of lines. So you get paired up with a person in the classroom, it pairs it up for them, and then they ask yes or no questions, like, is the slope greater than 0? And the other person has to respond yes or no. So it really gets that terminology and that vocabulary involved, and also really helps them realize what the different things of a line are and the different characteristics of lines. So this is an example from last year that we had, and it shows how many they got right and wrong. I made the names anonymous on it, but you don't have to. And they can turn them. They actually turn them in, and you can just get a score on it right away. So they ask different questions, like, is it upside down? Is the vertex on 0, 0, the origin? Is it negative? Is the vertex on the x-axis? They get all that terminology down, and it's great for all that vocabulary and working in the vocabulary and how it works. So these are actually parabolas for my algebra class, but it's the same game. It's and then they narrow it down, and hopefully they choose the right one from there. Again, all these tools are things that I've found to be the best over the past couple of years. I really think that it's important to make a variety or differentiate what you do each day. You can't just do the same process over and over again, because it kind of gets them complacent and doesn't get them putting in all the effort that they possibly could. Thanks for tuning in this week, guys. Next week, I'm actually going to talk about something related to coaching. So it'll be a little bit different than all the teaching tools. Have a great week. I'm going to enjoy my fall break now. Thanks. Bye.